there's a great English word called conation, which means, in order to stop me, you're going to have to shoot me. I could list more failures probably than successes because, you get knocked down 90 times, you get up 91, right? Don't stop. Keep on. You're going to have these setbacks, but have this attitude. No one's going to be able to stop you unless they literally shoot you. So keep on, keep it on. I'm Larry Benz. I'm a physical therapist, and I've been fortunate to be able to found and build companies around physical therapy and healthcare and education and occupational health. Right now, I'm currently serving as a CEO of a very large dental platform in the U.S. and still in the founder role of my companies that I build. And I work with a lot of other small companies around the U.S. infusing capital, being on advisory groups, and helping entrepreneurs flourish. I am a baby boomer. I'm on the upper side of a baby boomer age-wise. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. I grew up in a baby boomer town, a suburb of Cleveland called Wickliffe, Ohio. You have to understand these suburbs that were built around these big cities were all, post-World War II baby boomer towns, all VA subsidized housing. All the parents worked in the factories, the steel mills. Neighborhoods were just, crowded with kids. I was the youngest of 5, and we were one of the smaller families. My dad was a route salesman and a bread delivery guy. He did that for most of my growing up years, and it was a little bit of entrepreneurial, zest in there that I probably, spun off a little bit on me. My mom was an at-home mother, as most were in that kind of generation, raising babies, raising kids. But she had a little entrepreneurial sense in her. She would work as an independent kind of contractor doing interviewing. Being in sort of the lower middle class, you never felt like you needed anything, but you never felt like you lived a life of luxury either. It was always hand-me-downs, always things in the neighborhood. It was just a really fun place to grow up. When I think of the word entrepreneurialism, I don't think of till maybe when Reagan was president, did you ever hear the word entrepreneur? But you sort of thought like ingenuity, enterprise, doing something a little innovative, doing something a little different. And so I was always one that wanted to, very creative about trying different ventures. So I was always doing something. I had a paper route. I cut lawns during the summer. Those were entrepreneurial ventures because I'd get other people to kind of help on some of the lawns that I couldn't cover. And I would, get paid $3. I'd give them $2.75. I had the paper route thing going. I had during the winter, we had snow like crazy in the Midwest. So shoveling driveways was the ultimate side hustle. People couldn't get out of their driveway, and they had kids around there shoveling them, breaking ice and doing it. All those things kind of working together, I think, planted seeds around, again, I would think of it more in terms of enterprise rather than entrepreneurial thing. And if you ask parents back in those days, what do you want your kid to be? In those days, they would say, I want my kid to be a good kid. I want him to be disciplined. I want him to be a family, or I want him to be good. If you ask parents now, they would say, I want my kids to be happy. So somewhere along the way, we transform from good to happy. I want to go back to good, because if you're a good person, you'll have discipline. You'll be able to have emotional intelligence. You'll be able to suppress your thoughts and have the disciplines to make it. And those things are transportable. If you're good, disciplined, and have great habits, whatever venture you go into, you're going to be successful. Like if you ask me what my why is, it's always this idea of this restlessness of finding a better way, taking something very, very complicated or complex, simplifying it for sort of the betterment of others, and then building trusted relationships in the process. I think the seed that was planted in me by teachers and coaches, especially in school, was leave something better than where you found it. And that to me is ultimately what an entrepreneur really tries to do, is they see something and they try to make it better than when they found it. I was in the military. I was an Army soldier. I'd gone to graduate school at the U.S. Army Baylor program in San Antonio, and I'd got my master's in physical therapy. Being in the military, people think it's it would be the opposite of where an entrepreneur should be. No, it's not true. I mean, you want to be in the military if you're an entrepreneur, because the more you do, the more they want you to do. And the more creative you are, the more you're going to get support to do different things. So I was an absolute entrepreneur when I was active duty. We started all kinds of programs. We covered sports, for example. We had athletic trainers. We went on site at all the maintenance areas at Fort Knox and taught all the workers about back pain prevention programs, and just did a bunch of fun things, ordered a bunch of equipment, all kinds of things. But what happened in Kentucky was I didn't realize what a supply-demand curve was in PT. Hardin County, Elizabethtown, by way of example, I started moonlighting, when I was active duty after work. I would see patients. And what I found was that at that time there was about, Hardin County, 90,000 people. There was maybe like 5 PTs. There was just very upside down supply-demand curve. It still exists, but then it was really, really backwards. I'd also met what is now my wife, who grew up in Hardin County, who grew up in Elizabethtown, not far from Fort Knox, and she's also a physical therapist. So the opportunity for us, while she was, we got married, she was working, and I was moonlighting, was just immense. That's what an entrepreneur takes advantage of. It doesn't matter where you're living or where you're. I could have been living anywhere, and I would, try to find, again, a better way. Particularly the rural areas, like you've heard me talk about in the speech. I followed wherever Walmart was, I wanted to be. And that was the Sam Walmart strategy. And so what I said was, well, if they need a Walmart there, they're likely going to need a physical therapist. And it was correct. Flash, 30 years later, no more than 35 years later, I'm sitting in Bentonville, Arkansas, bidding on an opportunity to become Walmart's choice partner for the United States. They were trying to become more of a healthcare provider. And I tell them that story. And sure enough, we landed the contract with Walmart 35 years later. They were a key customer for us, their warehouses on our Fit for Work side. And so the strategic partnership turned into a real partnership many years later. We were the first group that really said you do not need to pack up your bags and move somewhere to have a residency, that you could do it in a blended, or back then we called it flip education approach. This is pre-COVID. And that was bizarre back in those days. And so we said, you know what, if we can do that, why don't we take physical therapy schools, which are 3-year doctorate programs. They tend to have 30 students, brick and mortar. Why don't we do 2 years, take 100 students and do it remotely? Everybody thought we were crazy. They'll never get accredited. We won't find a partner. We knocked on probably 100 doors around the country of different colleges. Then we found a sleepy for-profit school down in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they said yes. And so that became the first blended 2-year physical therapy program in the United States. Well, you can imagine during COVID, we had all these programs all over the United States saying, we now have to teach remote. Tell us how to do it. We were able to share that, not only the technology, which was pretty easy, but the content and the how of doing it. And so that is probably what we're best known for from an enterprise standpoint. I think the second thing is we have a lot of clinics. We have 850 physical therapy clinics. We went from nobody knowing who we were to being one of the biggest in the United States. And so when you do things like that, it does impact, people and magnify. If you look at all my greatest accomplishments, financially speaking, they've all been done through partnerships. And being a partner really over time forces you to learn people really well. What are their hot buttons? What are the things that makes them upset? And so I think I've identified those kind of things really well. The other thing I think I've done reasonably well is I've identified my weaknesses. I'll give you one example. I'm a horrible interviewer because I love everybody and I see the potential in everybody. So if I'm interviewing somebody, I immediately want to hire them because I see aspirationally what they can become. Well, I've learned over the years that's not a good interviewer. You've got to offset with somebody who's just the opposite of you. And so along the way, what you learn is, where can I stay in my lane? And the bigger you get, the smaller those lanes become, to where the only thing I do now is development, both people and business, strategy, and lead. The other thing I did learn from mentors along the way is a great author named Jim Collins. I think he was the first one who really, in my mind, said, what you try to do is find the things you're really good at, what the market needs, and what people are willing to pay for. The intersection of those 3 circles is really what you're trying to accomplish. And so as I got more and more employees, I knew I didn't need to do everything. people would tell you I've been very productive my whole career, but that productivity has changed from being a grinder, if you will, to being a minder, to being a finder. You know, those three things along your career have to change, and you have to find out when the natural transition for you is to go from that grinder stage to the finder stage to the minder stage.
In your Hall of Fame speech, you mentioned that the mission and the way you define success in companies, that have stayed the same throughout the years. The success is finding a better way, simplifying the complex and sharing it with others, and all while building trusted relationships. How have you known
How have I known the right people?
the right people?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, I do believe a little bit in the law of attraction. You know, enthusiasm is contagious. And when you have enthusiasm and you're attracting people that have enthusiasm, there's magic that happens there. So I think I've been very, very fortunate there. I've always worked in community around a lot of people. Whether I was in the military, college, we were talking earlier about fraternity kind of days. And then afterwards, I would be very deeply embedded in the profession. So in my earlier career, I was involved in the organization's the Central District for Physical Therapy in the state of Kentucky. Then I worked on a national basis around it. And so I always had this opportunity to really network and engage. It's a risk mitigator for getting that accomplished. And so risk doesn't enter in the equation too much. And so, for me, I've never felt a significant amount of risk. There were times where you feel the tension of payroll. COVID, for example, hits. These kind of things happen. You might feel that, but you don't feel that you can't fail. In fact, it's just the opposite. You go into something knowing that you can't fail. And so the risk is really not in much of the equation, at least in my experience. Combination of never stop, the combination of keep on learning and staying curious with it. First idea is never your best one. And then stay encouraged. Stay around entrepreneurs. Find those who lift you up and motivate you, because being an entrepreneur can be a very lonely lifestyle. And the only way that you're going to overcome that is by finding peers, peer networks, mentors, and others. If you look at who's hiring people right now, it's not big companies. They're laying people off. It's startups and it's entrepreneurial ventures that are growing. And how do you get growth? You get growth through capital and through people, and you get it through entrepreneurs leading organizations. In a state like Kentucky, we have to have entrepreneurs that are finding a better way, right? That are taking the complex and simplifying it, sharing it with others, and building trusted relationships in the process, because that creates jobs.